2024 felt like a really important year for fashion. From Shein to LVMH, brands at all levels of the fashion industry were called out for misleading claims and corrupt behavior, both on social media and actually in court. And looking back, it feels like there were so many key moments where people refused to let fashion get away with bad behavior. Part of the reason for this is because the era of self-regulation with sustainable fashion is coming to an end. Previously approved legislation is coming to effect in 2025, and even more legislation was introduced and approved this year for the next coming years. And because of this, governments now have clear parameters of what brands can and can't do to hold them accountable with when they mess up. But another reason why 2024 felt like the year brands got called out is because of the changing consumer sentiment online. To me, it felt like more people were questioning the fashion industry for things they've previously gotten away with. From polyester usage and the overall decline in quality of fashion to the sheer amount of stuff we're constantly being told we need. It feels like there were so many important conversations around fashion happening on social media this year. From the letdown people felt when Brat Girl Summer dissolved into nothing more than a H&M partnership, the viral discourse around the Rory Gilmore sweater and why our clothes simply don't look like that anymore. The recent drama around notable influencer brands, which called into question their role in fashion. And of course, TikTok's biggest trend this year, underconsumption core, and how people related that to their wardrobes. Throughout this year, I released somewhat monthly headline videos on my channel, which tracked a lot of the greenwashing happening by brands and the subsequent fallouts. And I thought it could be really fun to go back and pick out 5 of my favorite moments from this year that felt like they were meaningful in some way, either because the lies and the sheer audacity of brands' behavior they exposed felt like a lot, or because the impact they had felt quite meaningful. So yeah, I thought it could be quite fun to pick out those 5 favorite stories for me, but I'd love to hear what you guys think were the most important moments in fashion greenwashing this year and share them in the comments below. I also want to highlight some of the positive news stories that I included in the fashion roundups and some of the progress that was made this year. So I'm going to be doing a little montage of that at the end, so stick around for that. And with that, let's get into it. Before we do, let's do the usual quick spiel. My name's Katie. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I talk about sustainable fashion, consumptive habits, social media, how all of those topics kind of interlink. And I have a podcast you can follow. You can subscribe to this channel, and I'm also on other social media, so follow me on there. And with that, let's get into it. You may have seen in the headlines recently about the Dior LVMH sweatshop scandal going on in Italy. The summary is that the workers were being paid low-level wages, living in terrible accommodation, and were being forced to work in unethical conditions in order to meet the demand of the luxury fashion brands. Mind you, this was being uncovered in the same summer that LVMH was a premium sponsor of the Olympic Games, where they reportedly spent 150 million euros to appear in front of you on your screens and flash their luxury products. So although the biggest name to come out of this Italian investigation was Dior, the investigators have said that close to a dozen luxury brands are also being investigated. The thing is, this is definitely not a standalone event. Even earlier in the year, we saw Loro Piana, another LVMH brand, called out for their $9,000 sweaters that rely on unpaid labor in Peru. If you read the article from Bloomberg on this expose, you'll know that the first sentence of the article sums up the whole issue really nicely. They hit the nail on the head with, once a year, a 75-year-old subsistence farmer works free of charge for the world's richest person. They're referring to Bernard Arnault, who is at the helm of LVMH, luxury fashion's biggest conglomerate. The summary of this scandal is that the luxury fashion brand has been taking advantage of an indigenous community in Peru, and in that time, the people in that community believe that Loro Piana has done nothing for their culture, which is made all the worse when you realize that the brand has a monopoly on that community and they aren't allowed to sell to any other brands. So they're at the complete whim of Loro Piana's pricing strategy, which clearly is not favorable to the indigenous community there, since the rate paid for this cashmere has fallen 36% in the past decade, whilst the price of the clothing that the brand is selling has only risen. 2 headlines occurring in the same year under the same luxury fashion conglomerate conglomerate. And the response from the fashion community highlights the issue even more. Fashion is constantly in this cycle of acting shocked when a new investigation turns out unethical concerns in luxury, and then forgetting about it for a couple of months once the news dies down, and then getting re-shocked when something else comes out. It's exhausting. And it not only allows brands to also keep acting surprised when this is happening in their supply chain, but it stops them from taking any accountability. And you might think I'm exaggerating here, but for the Dior scandal, the CFO literally said, "We had no idea," as though that is an excuse. And it's also so unlikely. Another Italian raid that was happening earlier in the year showed Chinese workers under unethical conditions working for Armani. And when this raid was taking place, an actual employee from Armani's manufacturing division was in the building. But when he was questioned, he said his focus wasn't on the working conditions of the factory that he was there to audit. It was on the quality of the product. Meanwhile, in the factory he was touring, the workers appeared to be living on site and operating machinery with safety mechanisms disabled. Like, how could you not spot that if you're touring the factory? It is just willful ignorance at that point. LVMH's culture of greed and corruption has gotten so bad that investors are now demanding change. And LVMH has promised to increase auditing in response to this backlash. But the fact that it took major headlines and investors' outcry to prompt this investigation is insane. And it does make you question what other scandals they're hiding in their parent company that we haven't dragged out of them yet. Let's do a little Shein update now. And if you didn't watch my video on the IPO drama, then I definitely recommend you go watch that. If you haven't, then you might not know this news. They've promised 200 million euros to a circular fund. Here's why that doesn't matter. Their estimated global revenue is 2 billion euros. The way they get that is from creating billions of throwaway items every year, knowing that they're destined to landfill within a matter of months. Exactly how many items is that? Well, new figures are suggesting it's up to 10k styles per day. That's not individual garments, that's new styles. So why have they bothered doing this? Clearly, it's not really to give back, considering 200 million is a tiny fraction of their global revenue. No, it's for publicity. Every major headline I know has covered this in some shape or form, especially since the whole industry has been consumed by the IPO drama, and anything Shein does right now is a hot topic. You might recognize this graph that Business of Fashion created a few years ago, showing how Shein's volume production far outpaces a lot of its rivals in the fashion industry. Well, now we have new charts that show that Shein is one of the worst polluters in the fashion industry right now. These charts help visualize exactly how much Shein is polluting and where that pollution is coming from. It also shows how that pollution compares to other names in the fashion industry, but also how it compares to Shein's previous years and the growth of emissions, which is really quite staggering. The ultra-fast fashion giant's emissions have nearly tripled in the past 3 years, as its growth far outpaces other major brands. For the first time, it's shown to be a higher polluter than Zara. Although it's important to note that companies have different ways of measuring their emissions, so this is just an estimate, but it's an educated estimate. Obviously, seeing these statistics, while it is eye-opening, isn't that interesting in itself. So let's talk about why it's so important. Well, Shein is on a PR crusade right now. As I said in my video, they're trying to list on the London Stock Exchange and they're trying to reform their image in order to do it. They're also trying to expand into Europe and grab that European market at a time when the EU is really cracking down on sustainability and trying to introduce a lot of new ESG laws that don't work with Shein's current business model. The company is really trying to market themselves as caring about sustainability, both for the reasons I've just mentioned, but also in order to market to that eco-conscious consumer that is growing in Europe. And one of the ways they love to paint themselves as sustainable is shoving their practically made to order, as they like to say, business model down our throats any chance they can get. In fact, their recent 2023 report had a whole page very close to the beginning talking all about this. But these new emission calculations from Shein's own report, and helpfully visualized by BOF, show that that impact is not being mitigated by their business model. The sheer volume of clothes produced by Shein is unfathomable. And Shein do not want to take responsibility for this overproduction. In fact, they try to shirk responsibility for these increased emissions by blaming it on factors outside of their control, like supply chains. But brands should not be able to get away with not taking responsibility for their supply chains. House of Sunny showcasing their vegan knitwear that was actually acrylic polyester base. A marketing slogan that is so loud and proud about vegan knitwear is a bold statement to make. You are definitely trying to put in the consumer's mind a certain image for your brand as being wholesome, as being good for the planet because it's vegan, and good for animals because it's vegan. And the fact that these vegan sweaters are actually made from oil-based materials does feel very greenwashy. Using that phrase vegan knitwear to talk about your polyester sweaters is not great for the consumer to think that they're purchasing something that's, environmentally friendly, or, just the connotations that come with the word vegan, right? Good for you, good for the planet. And then look further into the product and see acrylic as like the main fabric. It's very misleading, I think, and it's very intentional from the brand on what they're trying to do. I recently saw a Abercrombie jacket going viral on TikTok that is vegan suede. So this jacket is marketed as vegan suede, the first thing the consumer sees. And it's only when you scroll down to the jacket's material composition that you find out it's actually 92% polyester, 8% elastane. And in the materials section, they actually call it a faux suede, which is probably a lot more common description for this kind of polyester suede-like material that a lot of us would recognize. And I just think when you see this, it makes it so purposely clear that they've included vegan suede in the description of the item to try dupe customers into thinking there's some sustainability involved. The jacket is also £90. Like, come on. £90 for polyester that you're calling vegan, as though it's in some way better for the planet. Nike is currently struggling to remain profitable, and the first thing they've done to restructure the business is let their sustainability staff go. So industry leaders like Nike aren't the first brands to be struggling recently in today's fashion climate. There's a couple of influencing factors that means all brands haven't been seeing the profits they've been seeing in recent years. But you think with how big a name Nike is, they will be able to afford to keep their sustainability staff, who are doing arguably the most important work in the business right now. The company has made some pretty ambitious commitments to sustainability in recent years. And when we say ambitious, we mean ambitious. Like doubling their business while halving their carbon emissions ambitious. Since December, Nike has lost about 30% of the employees that worked primarily on sustainability initiatives in the company due to layoffs, voluntary departures, or transferation of duties to other parts of the business. One former Nike employee has called this a sustainability bloodbath. But even before December, when these layoffs started, the company had already started missing its targets for carbon emission reduction. In contrast, you have the sportswear company Puma in the news recently for its commitments to sustainability. They've started scaling up their textile recycling following the current football season. And it's just so insane that when you compare the profits of these two companies, one is doing really quite groundbreaking work to make textile recycling a thing, and the other is cutting employees whose sole goal is to reduce that company's emissions. Nike is clearly losing market share and trying to overcompensate for that financial loss by prioritizing short-term initiatives over sustainability's longer-term payouts. Now, Nike have responded to some of these allegations. Their chief sustainability officer said that the company's current strategy was embedding the sustainability work into the business, basically making it every employee's job to think about sustainability rather than having dedicated employees that have sustainability in their job title. This sounds like a cop-out to me. I mean, when you make everyone's job sustainability, then it's so easy to push it to the side when it comes to more pressing issues like short-term profits. This is why this news matters. How can we expect real, tangible sustainability progress from brands, and more specifically athleisure brands, if one of the industry's biggest giants clearly clearly does not take it seriously enough. Why is it that sustainability was one of the first things to go when the company started struggling? How do they expect to keep the ambitious targets they made that consumers have bought into and believed if they're laying off the staff responsible for meeting it? Does this now place all of their sustainability commitments on the borderline of greenwashing if they're clearly not prioritizing it in their company? Nike recently had their annual shareholder meeting, and I haven't been this invested in boardroom drama since I watched Succession last year. There was a lot of anticipation leading up to the event that happened last week because shareholders were voting on proposals that directly concern the sustainability of Nike, including one which called for Nike to address human rights issues like wage theft and forced labor in their supply chain, which the shareholders voted against. One of the things that was approved, however, was the CEO's $30 million compensation package for 2024, which, in my opinion, just shows you exactly where Nike's priorities lie. The next story is all about Lululemon. Following a complaint lodged by Stand.Earth, the Canada Bureau of Investigations has now opened a case into Lululemon and their greenwashing allegations. In February, Stand.Earth asked the agency to look into the brand, and specifically whether their Be Planet messaging was misleading customers. Stand.Earth say that Lululemon is benefiting from advertising as green and eco-friendly, whilst at the same time profiting off business practices that do not substantiate this claim. Specifically, based on Stand.Earth's own data, they show that Lululemon's emissions have been steadily growing in the past few years, and this directly goes against their signing of the Paris Agreement. Part of the agreement is a commitment to halving their emissions by 2030 against their emissions from 2018. Stand.Earth is alleging that Lululemon has not done this and is not on track to do this. The French government has said that Paris 2024 will be the most sustainable Olympic Games yet, but despite the alleged focus on sustainability, they haven't addressed the fashion behind the games. Given that the fashion industry is responsible for a lot of worldwide pollution, you'd think that they would extend this sustainability messaging to the uniforms that teams are using, but this seems to have been overlooked. Aside from the greenwashing stuff, Lululemon was also one of the brands to gift a whole lot to their athletes. Team Canada had a whole suitcase worth of merch in there. And sadly, this overconsumption is a general theme across brands. Like I said, I wanted to finish off the video by collating some of my favorite positive news stories and signs of progress in the sustainable fashion industry, because I do feel it's really, really important to focus on these things and show them alongside all of the bad that's happening in fashion as a way for us to remain positive, to feel like everything isn't doom and gloom, I guess. And personally, I'm very, very hopeful for what 2025 will bring. As I mentioned, lots of legislation is coming in next year. I feel like this recent trend of people waking up on social media and talking more about fashion greenwashing and how important it is that we value our clothing is only going to increase in 2025, hopefully. There's also trend predictions like chaotic customization that people are saying will be big for next year. That gives me hope we'll be moving away from the mass-produced trends that fast fashion brands profit off of and moving into a more customizable, personalized, handmade, upcycled series of fashion. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was a nice look back at everything that's happened for fashion in 2024, what feels important to me as someone who looks at a lot of these stories. And I just wanted to say as well that I am super, super grateful for everyone who has watched, who has subscribed to my channel. It's been an amazing year for me, and I'm really excited to see what the next one brings. I hope you have a lovely Christmas, and I'll speak to you really soon. Bye.